Hello everyone, and welcome to a scary and disturbing episode of BioLogic Science News. I recently posted news episodes about an outbreak of plague in Madagascar, and about its spread to mainland Africa. A lot of the data coming out of the infected regions is really concerning, because it shows us that we're dealing with an evolved strain of plague. Okay, first, let me give you some background information. The plague is caused by the gram-negative bacteria species Yersinia pestis, which has three forms of infection: septicemic, pneumonic, and bubonic plague. Septicemic plague and bubonic plague are spread when an infected rodent is bit by a flea, infecting the flea. The flea then bites a human and transmits the bacteria into the human's body. Bubonic plague travels through the lymphatic system and causes dangerous inflammation in the lymph tissues. Swollen lymph nodes can become painful, globular protrusions poking out of the skin, sometimes popping open from the internal pressure and leaking their stinky bacteria gunk inside or outside your skin. Septicemic plague infects the bloodstream, causing extreme sepsis and necrosis. This blood infection can lead to a condition called disseminated intravascular coagulation, which is where smaller vasculature, like capillary beds, will experience widespread clotting and subsequent structural failure. With the capillary beds plugged up and collapsed, patches of cells can't get oxygen or nutrients, and they begin to experience ischemic necrosis. From a human perspective, this causes the flesh on our fingers, our nose, our ears, etc. to turn black from patches of dead necrotic tissue. Pneumonic plague is an airborne version that infects the lungs and the throat. It's spread by coughing, sneezing, and saliva, and it irritates the throat, stimulating the production of mucus. The mucus of your respiratory tract slides down into your lungs and fills them up, ultimately killing you through pneumonia. If all of this doesn't sound horrible enough, consider the fact that the initial symptoms seem relatively benign, like a bad cold or the flu. But if you don't get the infection treated quickly, like within the first 24 to 36 hours, the risk of death rises to right around 100%. The recent plague outbreak in Madagascar is partly bubonic plague, but it's mostly pneumonic plague, which is spreading across mainland Africa as I record this, and most likely as you're listening to me. The real scary part about this outbreak in particular is that strains extracted from infected patients have been shown in laboratory testing to be resistant to multiple drugs traditionally used to treat the plague. The World Health Organization says in a recent report, and I quote, "The recent appearance in Madagascar of a strain of the plague microbe Yersinia pestis showing multi-resistance to antibiotics is a matter of much concern and highlights the necessity for effective surveillance of the disease. This strain, isolated from a patient with bubonic plague, was resistant to all first-line antibiotics, as well as major alternative drugs." This is really bad, because while pneumonic plague and bubonic plague can be treated, the antibiotics are really only effective if they're started early, like I said, within the first 24 to 36 hours of infection, and if you take them consistently for up to a week. These include drugs like streptomycin, tetracyclines, and chloramphenicol. Bubonic plague has a high mortality rate, something like 40 to 60% in people who don't get treatment. Getting the infection treated with antibiotics can reduce this mortality risk below 15%, but that's still a sizable risk. Pneumonic plague is way more dangerous, like stupidly dangerous, because if you don't get it treated within the day you get infected, your risk of death is virtually 100%. It's guaranteed. It will kill you through pneumonia. This is one of the big reasons why a multi-drug resistant strain of pneumonic plague is just terrifying. The multi-drug resistant strain reported by the World Health Organization was the less lethal bubonic plague. But don't mistake this. This is way too close for comfort. Whatever the genetic adaptations were that allowed this bubonic plague bacteria to become drug resistant, we're still talking about literally the same species of bacteria that causes pneumonic plague. Parallel mutations, or simple lateral gene transfer, can give the resistance genes of one of the Yersinia pestis strains to another, and before we know it, we'll be dealing with a highly lethal, airborne pathogen that doesn't respond to the drugs we use to treat it. That's really not good, but at this point, it's a distinct possibility.